We want to talk next about our News Talk Nation survey. This week, we are concentrating on family life. Almost 80% of those surveyed said that they think their children are more likely to be exposed to bullying in school nowadays. Just 15% believe they're more likely to be bullied online. I'm joined on the line by Stephen James Minton, who is with the Trinity School of Education, and also Sean Cottrell, the director of the Irish Primary Principals Network. Stephen, if I can go to you first of all, this surprised me because I would have assumed that the main problem for children nowadays is their exposure that they have to the internet. We know that in Ireland more and more children are getting access to the internet at a younger age. Is school still the main place where they are subjected to bullying?
Yeah, I mean, there's considerable overlap, of course. Our most recent findings, my own most recent findings, show that in primary schools there's actually been a dip in the number of children reporting having been bullied. Back in '93, that figure was about 1 in 3 would report having been bullied in any school term. Now it's about 1 in 4. More recently, in terms of cyberbullying, we have an estimation that about 1 in 7 children will be bullied within any school term on the net or over mobile phones. So, I mean, from those findings, statistically, it's still more likely that school is the place that children will be bullied.
But it's a changing world we're living in. How does cyberbullying take place? In what form does it exist?
Well, we found that the most frequent forms are bullying via mobile phones, which would include obviously text message bullying, use of mobile phone cameras to take and distribute unpleasant pictures, embarrassing film clips, and so on. And then, of course, the concern for many parents nationwide is social networking sites. Those will be the two most frequent forms of cyberbullying. Things like chat room bullying, e-room bullying, instant messaging are really not too frequent. But these days, of course, you said about a changing world. I mean, we have to also think about bullying via devices such as Xbox and Nintendo DSi.
How does that work? I mean, an Xbox is something you play games on, isn't it?
Wouldn't you think so? Yes, but of course the fact that communication is permitted between players means that the door is open for unpleasant communication between players as well. So, I mean, there have been a few cases of bullying via the Xbox as well.
Sean Cottrell from the Irish Primary Principals Network. Are teachers finding, Sean, that the internet and mobile phones and everything that Stephen was talking about there are adding into the bullying rather than overtaking it?
I think that's probably true to say. I'm interested by the previous speaker's statistics. I think the drop in bullying in primary school level overall would reflect our own experience as well, because I think most schools nowadays have worked pretty hard in the last decade at least on trying to deal with bullying as proactively as possible. I think the secret to actually defeating it, if such thing is ever possible, is preventative work, because I mean, always, let's say, having a policy that only deals with counteracting the cause or the symptoms of bullying is never going to really achieve much. I think most schools now, let's say, have policies which include, let's say, things like questionnaires which they regularly give to children about, like where they can feedback anonymously as to where bullying happens, who does it, the where, when, how, and so on and so forth, which allows teachers to get an insight. It's a wonderful way of giving teachers an insight into the world of bullying. But the difficult part really is what you just said a moment ago, is the cyberbullying. That is proving extremely difficult to penetrate.
And when you're talking about those guidelines, you mentioned guidelines there, are they coming from a state level, or is it up to individual schools and VECs or whatever the organising body is to implement them?
Well, I mean, there are guidelines from the Department of Education, but every school must develop its own policy, because you see, like things like whether a school is single-sex or co-ed, whether a school is on a single-story or two-story building, whether it's got a large playground or a small one. Like, the geography of the school is hugely important in terms of how bullying actually can develop and fester.
But when did we get those national guidelines last? Are they updated to take into account things like cyberbullying?
Well, I don't think there's been any specific ones on cyberbullying to my knowledge, but certainly most schools are pretty proactive in this area, because, I mean, but unfortunately the trouble is that, you see, cyberbullying by its nature isn't restricted even to time, because, let's say, I mean, even if you do ban mobile phones within school time, which most people do because there's simply a distraction to learning if nothing else, there's still the issue of, by night and at weekends and at holiday times, kids are in constant communication with each other. And in fact, I mean, I would think that this is probably the first generation of children in the history of humankind who are ahead of their parents with regard to their ability to communicate.
Yeah, that's the truth. I've written down here in front of me that 1993 was the last set of anti-bullying guidelines that came out from the department. Would that be a fair assessment?
Possibly, it could well be, but I mean, I suppose most schools wouldn't be waiting for the department nowadays, to actually to tell them what to do.
Well, I suppose that there's merit in that. Stephen, back to that. I mean, you're talking about the point that was made by Sean is that this is a generation that's ahead of the parents. Look, 80% is the figure that's in this News Talk Nation survey. They still think bullying because that's the way that they would have seen bullying when they were in school. And, is there a little bit of naivety on the part of parents that, they're letting them have access to the iPad, they're letting them have access to the internet, relatively unsupervised, thinking, sure, he's only 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, what harm can come to him?
Yeah, I mean, I have the privilege of talking to parents' bodies on quite a regular basis. Just to clear up a little bit of the discrepancies, the last guidelines were actually 1993. There was a template for post-primary schools issued in 2006. This advice for post-primary schools from the department on safe internet usage. But schools...
Things have moved on a fair bit since 2006, yeah, exactly. Never mind 1993.
I mean, yeah, if you look at sort of like even sort of old... If you look at TV programmes from the early 90s and they get out a mobile phone, it's like they're talking into a brick,
Yeah.
So, I mean, things have moved on and schools really do actually need support and assistance on this. And schools have done their best to bring those figures down within school. But, as was said... The problem is that parents are sort of like not naive, but sort of like there's a bit of confusion out there. Really,
they're actually helpless, I think, because I think a lot of parents report to us that through principals that they don't know what to do. They just don't know which way to turn. And I think there's a huge need for some program to help parents get actually into the Facebook, into Twitter.
Well, I mean, those sort of resources have actually been produced about 3 years ago, and this is the thing. The confusion is such that resources are there, and parents don't know that they're there.
Yeah.
The Office for Internet Safety produced a series of leaflets. That's their division of the Department of Justice and Law Reform around cyber safety, cyber bullying, social networking sites. They're available as free downloads. Have been for 3 years, and parents just aren't aware of them.
OK, where do you get them, just briefly?
Go to the Office for Internet Safety online, and you can get them as downloads, as PDFs.
OK.
Simple as that, very well written, assumes no knowledge.
Yeah, just don't assume that your kids aren't engaging in that activity
or
the victims of it.
There is that fear that sort of like our kids are way ahead of us, and, it suits us when we want a kid to, set the Sky Plus or something, but it undermines us as parents when kids report cyberbullying and we can't help.
Stephen James Minton from Trinity College Dublin, Sean Cottrell, Director of the Irish Primary Principals Network. Gentlemen, thank you both.